Let's hear from one biodiversity and habitat specialist. That's Renier Terblanche, who joins us via our telephone line this morning. Great to have you on the program, so thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. So, multiple questions arising from what's taking place. Let's break it down to its most basic form. What exactly is happening?
Yes, Ayana, this year it's very early because normally the main wave of the migration is midsummer, and this year we're very lucky with an early wave, and I think there's going to be a larger wave coming. So what's happening is that from the northern Karoo and southern Kalahari, there are lots of shepherd's trees there, and these brown-veined whites or pioneer caper whites, their caterpillars are breeding on those shepherd's trees, and then they start to migrate in a northeastern direction across the high veld. For example, I think those coming from about east of Kimberley will cross the Soweto area later on, and so on. But there's such a lot to find out still. But that's more or less the idea we have at this stage.
Sure. Very interesting indeed. I mean, do we know, for instance, if all of them land up at their final destination? Probably not. I mean, they're so small and delicate. I imagine some of them sadly don't really get to where they're going, do they?
Yeah, no, there are lots of spiders that are very happy. You get them in spider webs, and even chameleons take them on. But what's weird is that one would think with these clouds of butterflies, you'll have a frenzy of birds, for example, right, that are feeding on them. But at this stage, we only saw that birds like bee eaters and so on can eat the adult butterflies, and caterpillars are eaten by cuckoos. But it's almost a select bunch of birds that can actually utilize them. They are probably a bit toxic for most vertebrates.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that. I mean, we also heard that the last time we kind of saw this was about 2 years ago. I wonder how much truth there is in that, especially because I thought this was an annual migration.
Yeah, no, it happens every year. It's just that some years they are less conspicuous, and some years they are less abundant. And what we found out during the 2020 year, that year with the butterfly counts, I observed 21 different butterfly species that also take part in this, what we call the Kalahari butterfly migration. And then the more the data come in now, the more we see that this might be one of the greatest migration events on Earth. Wow. There are an abundance of butterflies, and not only the pioneer caper white, 21 other species also being observed, though they are less abundant in the migrations. But what was amazing about that 2020 migration, I remember once end of January that year, it was in the Tlokwe municipality. I've got rectangular sample plots all across Africa at this stage, southern Africa. And at the one sample plot, 20 meters by 10 meters, I observed 492 brown-veined whites passing in 15 minutes. And if you wow, calculate very conservatively, there must have been around more than 6 million crossing a 500-kilometer belt transect in only 15 minutes. So I'm busy analyzing all the data for my PhD, but some of the numbers are staggering.
Sure. Sounds like it. One wonders the impact that lockdown might have had on how this part of nature has performed. I mean, we've seen, for instance, in parts of Milan in Italy, where lakes, where we thought there was no longer any kind of biodiversity, really started flourishing because human activity had been on the downward trend. 2020 was around the time when we were starting to kind of limit our movement in and around the country because of COVID-19 related restrictions. That kind of aspect, to what extent does it affect this migration, or is it too soon to tell?
Yeah, I don't think in southern Africa, I think the lockdown would have an effect that there are less casualties on the roads because many of the butterflies are hit by cars. I always say, you know, in a few trips down to Cape Town and back, I must have killed more insects than I've collected butterfly specimens in my whole life, you know. But because their habitat and the source area are still intact where these migrations are coming from, I think the lockdown did not have that much an effect. I think what happened is we had a very dry cycle, and now it started to rain a lot more. And then that huge migration was due to rain, more rain, definitely, you know, the whole system picking up. These butterflies are indicative of good conditions, and you know, the whole ecosystem integrity picking up.
Yeah, I mean, not only are these butterflies a sight for sore eyes, I mean, they really do make for beautiful sightseeing as you're stuck in traffic because of load shedding, as it were. But I wonder whether there are any kind of fringe benefits if they ever pass by your garden, for instance.
Yes, that's right. I think they pollinate a lot of plants, for starters. And then what's also amazing is that I've got a soil scientist on board in the Kalahari, and we looked down underneath the basket trees, the nutrient cycling, because the caterpillars are stripping the foliage of the trees. And underneath the trees, the nutrient cycling must be amazing. And when the better cycles come with much more rain in the Kalahari, those trees are just abound with that kind of nutrients available. And what's amazing is it's almost a story of the Kalahari provides this nutrient cycling for the rest of southern Africa, because those butterflies then fly northeast. And at first I thought I was a bit biased, but if one considers the numbers, the sheer numbers of these butterflies in the whole nutrient cycling process, that must be amazing, because they are, you know, the spiders, they are using them as prey and so on, the whole nutrient cycling. That impact must be quite significant, and also on pollination, definitely on pollination.
Sure. There are some people obviously superimposing some kind of spiritual, ideological, perhaps even theological meaning to these butterflies, but it's great to get some kind of perspective from a biodiversity and habitat specialist to help us unpack the nature that underpins all of this. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Rainier Terblanche is a biodiversity and habitat specialist. As we make sense of yet another year of the migration of these white butterflies in many parts of Gauteng. Once again, thanks very much indeed.